Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner Stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I found a red room that claims to stream Santa's naughty list punishments. The punishments are real, and I recognized one of the kids. Alright, so let me preface this by saying I've never been one to believe in the paranormal, conspiracy theories, or whatever creepypasta nonsense usually floats around Reddit. But something happened to me recently that I can't explain, and honestly, I'm scared to even post this. If I don't though, I think I'll go insane trying to keep it all to myself. This all started 2 weeks ago. I was doom scrolling TikTok at 2 a.m., trying to distract myself from the fact that I had an overdue project and a week's worth of laundry piling up. You know how the algorithm works. It serves you up just the right mix of funny animal videos and creepy, did you know, content to keep you hooked. That's when I stumbled across a video that felt off. It was just a screen recording of a dark web page with what looked like an old-fashioned Christmas font at the top. Santa's naughty list punishments, live. The caption read, "Don't click this unless you're ready to see the truth." I'll admit, I thought it was some kind of edgy marketing ploy or an early Christmas ARG, but the comments were flooded with people asking for the link, swearing it was real, and warning others not to watch. Normally, I'd just scroll past that kind of thing, but I was curious and bored, a bad combination, so I made the first mistake. I went looking for it. Finding the link wasn't easy. After a few dead ends on sketchy forums and some broken links, I ended up on a subreddit dedicated to obscure deep web discoveries. Buried in the comments of an old post, I found what I was looking for. A set of instructions on how to access the site using Tor. The comment had a ridiculous amount of upvotes for how vague it was, and the username was just a random string of numbers and letters. I followed the steps and eventually landed on a plain black page with a single line of text in red. Are you ready to see who made the naughty list? 2 buttons below are read yes and no. I hesitated. I knew this was probably some kind of elaborate hoax, but there was a tiny part of me that felt uneasy. What if it wasn't? What if I was about to see something I couldn't unsee? But like an idiot, I clicked yes. The screen glitched for a second, then the page loaded. There was a countdown timer in the center, ticking down from 5 minutes. Below it, there was a chat box where people were spamming messages like "show us" and "this better be real." I couldn't type anything. The chat was locked for new users, and then I saw the first name on the list. It wasn't a random list of strangers or a bunch of fake names like I expected. The name at the top was Josh R., a kid I used to babysit back in high school. My heart sank. I hadn't seen Josh in years, but I remembered him as this sweet, shy kid who was obsessed with Minecraft and Pokemon. Seeing his name there felt personal in a way that I couldn't explain. The countdown hit 0, and the screen changed. The live stream started. At first, the camera feed was shaky, like someone was walking through a dark forest. You could hear the crunch of snow and wind rustling through the trees. The audio was muffled, but there was this faint jingle, like sleigh bells, mixed with whispers that I couldn't make out. The camera panned to a clearing, and that's when I saw it. A giant wooden chair, painted red, with iron restraints on the armrests. It looked like some twisted version of Santa's throne at the mall. A boy was strapped to the chair, struggling against the restraints. His face was blurry, but I swear to God, it was Josh. He was screaming, but the sound was distorted, like it was being played backward. Then, a figure stepped into frame. It was dressed like Santa, but not the jolly Coca-Cola version you're used to. The suit was tattered and stained, and the mask. God, the mask. It looked like it was made of cracked porcelain, with a wide, painted grin that didn't match the dead eyes staring out from the holes. "Josh R.," the voice boomed, echoing like it was coming from a cavern. "You've been very, very naughty." The chat exploded. People were typing things like, "This is fake, right? And what did he do?" But no one had any answers. The figure pulled out a massive candy cane, not the kind you hang on a tree, but a sharpened, jagged one, and pointed it at Josh. "You know why you're here," it said. Josh shook his head, sobbing. "I don't. Please, I don't know." The screen cut to static. When the feed came back, the chair was empty, and the snow below it was stained red. That's when I closed the browser. I didn't want to see anymore. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I tried convincing myself that it was just some messed up roleplay or an advanced deepfake. But the thing that haunted me the most was how real Josh's fear looked. It wasn't just acting, it was the kind of terror you can't fake. And here's the thing, I Googled Josh the next day just to see if he was okay. His mom's Facebook page was flooded with posts asking for help. Josh had gone missing 3 days before I saw the stream. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I just sat in the dark, staring at my laptop, wondering if I'd really just witnessed a murder, or if my mind was playing tricks on me. You know that feeling when you're watching a scary movie and you keep telling yourself, it's not real. That was me. Except no amount of self-reassurance could erase the image of Josh strapped to that chair or the blood-soaked snow beneath it. By morning, I decided I had to tell someone. But who? The police? What would I even say? "Hi, I think I watched a live stream of a kid being tortured on some creepy, deep website." They'd laugh me out of the station. Or worse, start asking how I found the site in the first place. I couldn't afford to have my name attached to something like that. Not with my job, not with my life. Still, I couldn't just do nothing. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went back. This time, it was harder to find. The subreddit where I'd found the original link was gone. Like, completely nuked. No archived pages, no mentions of it anywhere. Even the deep website wasn't showing up in my browser history. It was like it had been erased. But I remembered the steps, and after a few hours of digging through sketchy forums and bypassing some shady-looking malware, I found the site again. The homepage was different now. Instead of the "Are you ready to see who made the naughty list?" prompt, there was just a single countdown timer, set to 24 hours. Below it, in smaller text, it read, "Next stream, 1 new entry." I wanted to puke. It was happening again. Another stream, another kid. I spent the rest of the day spiraling. I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that chair, that mask, that jagged candy cane. I thought about calling Josh's mom, but what was I supposed to say? "Hey, I think I saw your son on a murder stream?" No way. I'd sound insane. Instead, I tried searching for anything online that could prove the stream was fake. But every lead I found just brought up more questions. For example, I found a Reddit thread about urban legends tied to Christmas, and one of them caught my eye. The naughty list enforcer. The legend was old, like older than the Coca-Cola Santa we all know. According to the thread, it started in Eastern Europe and was passed down through generations. The story went that Santa didn't just give out coal to naughty kids. He had a helper who punished them, and not in a slap-on-the-wrist kind of way. This was old-school brutality. Think public flogging, being locked in cages, or worse. But here's the creepy part. Some of the users claimed the legend wasn't just folklore. They said there were real cases dating back to the early 1900s of kids disappearing around Christmas. All of them had been labeled troublemakers by their families or schools. One commenter even claimed their great-grandfather swore he saw the enforcer as a child, a man with a porcelain mask, dressed in red, dragging a sack through the snow. Sound familiar? By the time the countdown hit 0, I'd convinced myself it was all just an elaborate ARG. Maybe it was some twisted Christmas-themed marketing campaign for a horror movie, or a viral stunt. That had to be it, right? I opened the site again, telling myself it was just to confirm it was fake, just to see what kind of gimmick they'd pull this time. The stream started immediately. This time, the setting was different. No forest. It was indoors, an abandoned mall by the looks of it. The camera panned through a dimly lit food court, past overturned tables and shattered glass. Christmas decorations hung from the ceiling, dusty and forgotten, their lights flickering weakly. In the center of the court was that same red chair, and someone was in it. It was a little girl this time. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her hands and feet were strapped down, and she was sobbing so hard she could barely catch her breath. She had pigtails, a sparkly unicorn sweatshirt, and mismatched socks. I felt my chest tighten. The same figure appeared, the enforcer, as I'd started calling him in my head. Same tattered suit, same horrifying mask. He stood in front of the girl, tilting his head like he was studying her. "Emily G," the distorted voice boomed. "You've been very, very naughty." The girl shook her head violently. "No, I didn't mean to. Please, I'm sorry." The chat exploded again. "Who is this sicko? How do we report this? This is a kid." But just like last time, no one had any answers. The enforcer reached into his sack and pulled out a stuffed animal. At first, I thought he was going to give it to her, like some kind of sick joke, but then he twisted it in his hands, and it let out this awful squealing noise, like a real animal in pain. He dropped it, and the toy twitched and convulsed on the floor before going still. The girl screamed, and the camera zoomed in on her face. "I'll be good," she sobbed. "I promise. I'll be good." The screen glitched again. When it came back, the chair was empty. But this time, there was no blood. Just a single piece of paper taped to the chair. The camera zoomed in, and I could barely make out the words scrawled in red ink. Next stream, 2 new entries. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. This couldn't be real. It just couldn't. But as much as I tried to convince myself, there was one thing I couldn't ignore. The names. Emily G. I didn't know her personally, but I recognized her face from the local elementary school. I'd seen her at Starbucks with her mom a few times, always clutching that same unicorn sweatshirt. The next day, her photo was all over Facebook. Missing, After Emily's face started popping up on my newsfeed, the gravity of what I was dealing with really started to sink in. This wasn't an elaborate prank, a viral marketing campaign, or some edgy Christmas-themed ARG. This was real. Josh was real. Emily was real. And whatever sick bastard was behind this naughty list wasn't planning to stop. I thought about going to the police again, but every time I rehearsed what I'd say, it sounded insane. Hi, I think someone is abducting kids and live streaming their torture on the deep web. They'd laugh in my face. Or worse, arrest me for even knowing how to access that site. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started digging. I dove headfirst into the darkest corners of the internet, following every breadcrumb I could find about the naughty list. Most of what I uncovered was useless. Half-baked conspiracy theories, copy-paste urban legends, and a ton of trolls trying to spin it into some kind of Christmas creepypasta. But every now and then, I'd stumble across something that felt real, like the police report from 1997 about a 7-year-old boy named Michael K., who went missing from a Christmas parade in Chicago. Witnesses said they saw a man dressed as Santa leading him away. The boy's body was never found, but a single red glove, smeared with blood, was left behind in the snow. Or the blog post from 2006, written by a desperate mother whose daughter, Lily, vanished from a holiday-themed sleepaway camp. The camp counselors claimed she'd run away, but the mother swore she'd found hooves stamped into the dirt outside her cabin, like someone had led her into the woods. The more I read, the clearer it became. This thing wasn't new. It had been happening for decades, maybe even longer, and now, for whatever reason, it had moved online. I kept refreshing the site every hour, dreading the next stream, but too terrified to ignore it. Sure enough, the countdown appeared again the next night, 12 hours. This time, the text below it read, "Next stream, 2 new entries. Location, Snow Globe Mall." That's when my stomach dropped. Snow Globe Mall wasn't some random name. It was a real place. A mostly abandoned shopping center on the outskirts of my town. I'd gone there as a kid to sit on Santa's lap, back when it was still a bustling holiday hotspot. Now, it was little more than a graveyard of shuttered stores and flickering neon signs. This wasn't happening in some faraway place. It was happening here. I couldn't just sit and wait this time. If I didn't act, 2 more kids were going to die, and I couldn't live with myself if I let that happen. So I made a plan. I grabbed my old baseball bat from the closet, threw on a hoodie and gloves, and drove to Snow Globe Mall around midnight. I parked a few blocks away and snuck in through one of the side entrances, the kind where the glass was already smashed by vandals. The place was exactly how I remembered it, except much, much creepier. The air was freezing, and my breath came out in foggy bursts as I crept through the dark, empty halls. Fake snow and tinsel still hung from the ceilings, and a broken animatronic reindeer lay on its side, its mechanical eyes flickering weakly. Every creak of my footsteps echoed like a gunshot. But then I heard something else. A low, rhythmic hum, like a generator running in the distance. I followed the sound to the food court. That's when I saw it. The red chair. It was sitting in the center of the room, surrounded by a ring of flickering string lights. And next to it, on the ground, was a sack. The same sack I'd seen in the streams. I froze. My instinct was to turn and run, but something, curiosity, stupidity, I don't know, kept me rooted in place. I crept closer, gripping the bat so tightly my knuckles ached. The sack wasn't moving, but I could see the faint outline of something inside it. Something human. That's when I heard the footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, crunching over shards of broken glass. I ducked behind an overturned table and peeked out, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away. The figure stepped into the light, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from screaming. It was him, the enforcer. He looked even more horrifying in person. The porcelain mask was cracked and stained, and the fabric of his suit was so old and frayed it looked like it might crumble if you touched it. He was dragging a second sack behind him, this one writhing and jerking like whatever, or whoever, was inside was still alive. He stopped in front of the chair and dropped the sack with a thud. Then he turned to the first sack, the one I'd seen when I walked in. He reached into it and pulled out a child. It was a boy, maybe 10 years old, wearing a Spider-Man pajama shirt. His face was pale and tear-streaked, and his wrists were bound with thick rope. The enforcer lifted him like he weighed nothing and strapped him into the chair. The boy screamed, thrashing against the restraints, but it was no use. I wanted to move, to do something, but my legs felt like lead. I could only watch as the enforcer reached into his sack and pulled out a giant pair of scissors. They were old and rusted, with jagged edges that glinted in the faint light. "Please," the boy sobbed. "I'll be good. I promise." The enforcer didn't say a word. He just tilted his head, like he was considering the boy's plea. Then, without warning, he brought the scissors down on the boy's hand. I couldn't watch anymore. I bolted from my hiding spot, bat raised, and swung as hard as I could. The wood connected with the side of the enforcer's head, and he stumbled backward, dropping the scissors. The boy screamed, his bloody hand still trapped in the chair's restraint. The enforcer turned to me, and for the first time, I saw his eyes through the mask. They were cold and empty, like a shark's. He tilted his head again, almost like he was amused. Then he lunged. I swung the bat again, but he caught it mid-swing, yanking it out of my hands like it was nothing. I stumbled backward, tripping over a broken chair, and hit the ground hard. He loomed over me, raising the bat like he was about to crush my skull. That's when the siren started. Flashing red and blue lights spilled into the mall, and the enforcer froze. For a second, I thought he was going to finish me off anyway, but then he dropped the bat and bolted, disappearing into the shadows. I don't know how long I lay there, gasping for breath, before the cops found me. By the time they arrived, the enforcer was long gone, and so were the kids. But the chair, the sacks, the scissors, they were all still there. That was 2 days ago. The police took my statement, but they didn't seem to believe me. They chalked it up to some sick holiday prank and said they'd look into it, but I could tell they weren't taking it seriously. The site, though, it's still up, and the new countdown has already started. Next stream, 3 new entries. I think I'm on the list. I haven't slept since the night at Snow Globe Mall. Every creak of my apartment floorboards, every shadow that flickers across the walls makes my skin crawl. I keep telling myself that I should leave town, disappear somewhere. But where would I go? Whoever or whatever the enforcer is, it's clear that he doesn't just rely on chance. He knows who he's targeting. He knew Josh. He knew Emily. And now, I think he knows me. It started with small things. Things you could write off as paranoia. The feeling of being watched. The random car parked across the street with its headlights off. The strange calls from blocked numbers that were just static on the other end. But today, I got proof. When I woke up this morning, there was an envelope taped to my front door. No return address, no markings, just my name scrawled across the front in a shaky, almost childlike handwriting. I didn't want to touch it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 words, "Be ready." And that's when I heard it, this faint metallic jingle, like sleigh bells, but slower. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, but then I realized it was coming from my laptop. I hadn't even turned it on yet. I sat down and opened the screen. The naughty list site was already loaded, even though I hadn't visited it since the mall. The countdown was still there, but this time, the text below it was different. 3 new entries. Final warning. My heart dropped when I saw the names. Alicia T. Daniel R. U. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest tightening like I couldn't breathe. My name was there. Not just a random initial that could belong to anyone, but my full name, first and last. Whatever this was, it was coming for me next. And it wasn't just me. Alicia T. and Daniel R. Those names sounded familiar. Too familiar. I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Alicia Turner and Daniel Roberts, both co-workers. Alicia worked on the floor below me, the one who always smiled at everyone but kept to herself. Daniel, the IT guy who set up my work computer when I started. We were all on the list. I wanted to warn them, but what could I even say? Hey, there's a chance you're about to be kidnapped by a psychotic Santa impersonator who live streams people's torture. No one would believe me, but if I didn't try, I'd never forgive myself. I started with Alicia. She didn't pick up on the first call or the second. When I tried a 3rd time, her phone went straight to voicemail. I left a rambling message, telling her to call me back, that she was in danger, and that she shouldn't trust anyone. I doubt she'll take it seriously, but what else could I do? Daniel was next. He actually picked up, sounding annoyed. "What's up, man? Kinda busy." "Daniel," I said, my voice trembling, "you need to listen to me. You're in danger." There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" Just trust me, okay? Do not go home tonight. Don't meet up with anyone you don't know. Just stay in a public place, somewhere safe." "Are you drunk?" he asked, laughing nervously. "What's going on?" "I'll explain later," I said. "Just promise me, okay?" He sighed. "Fine. Whatever. But you're freaking me out, dude." Good. He should be freaked out. The rest of the day was a blur of pacing, double-checking my locks, and jumping at every sound. By the time the countdown hit 0, I was a mess. I forced myself to open the laptop again, knowing what I'd see. The stream started like always. This time, it was a basement. A cold, industrial-looking room with concrete walls and a single dangling light bulb that cast eerie shadows. The red chair was there, along with 3 smaller chairs arranged in a half circle, each with a child-sized stocking hanging from the back. But there were no kids in the chairs. Not yet. The camera panned to a figure standing in the corner. At first, I thought it was the enforcer, but this one was different. Taller, thinner, wearing a mask that looked like a reindeer's face, with hollow eyes and twisted antlers made of rusted metal. It just stood there, motionless, its head tilted slightly, as if listening for something. And then the sacks appeared. One by one, the enforcer dragged them into the room. 3 of them, writhing and squirming against the ropes that bound them. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew who they were. Alicia, Daniel, and me. The chat went wild. WTF is this? Is that real? This is sick. I couldn't tear my eyes away as the enforcer untied the first sack. It was Alicia. She was screaming, thrashing as he strapped her to the chair. The reindeer figure stepped closer, holding what looked like a whip made of tangled Christmas lights. They were flickering faintly, the bulbs cracked and sparking. "You've been very, very naughty," the enforcer said in that distorted, cavernous voice. The whip came down, and Alicia's screams cut through me like a knife. The lights sparked on impact, leaving singed marks on her arms and legs. She begged for mercy, but they didn't stop. They just kept going. I was shaking, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. When they moved on to Daniel, I couldn't watch. I turned away, but I could still hear it. The crack of the whip, the distorted laughter from the reindeer figure, Daniel's cries for help. And then it happened. The camera turned toward the third sack, but it wasn't me. They opened it, and instead of seeing my face, I saw someone else. A boy, maybe 12 or 13, with shaggy brown hair and a bloodied nose. I didn't recognize him, but the chat exploded. "Who is that? Not on the list. This is wrong." Even the enforcer seemed confused. He tilted his head, stepping closer to the boy, as if trying to figure out why he was there. That's when the reindeer figure stepped forward and whispered something into his ear. The enforcer nodded, then turned to the camera. His hollow eyes seemed to stare straight through the screen, right at me. "Next time, there will be no mistakes," he said. And then the stream ended. I'm still shaking as I type this. I don't know who that boy was or why he took my place, but I know one thing for sure. This isn't over. I'm still on the list, and they're coming for me. The night after the last stream, I packed a bag and left. I didn't have a plan, just the overwhelming need to get as far away from my apartment and Snow Globe Mall as possible. I thought about going to a friend's house, maybe a hotel, but every scenario felt like a trap. If the enforcer and his helpers could find me at home, what difference would it make where I ran? Still, driving helped. For a few hours, I convinced myself that I could escape, that putting miles between me and that cursed site might actually save me. But no matter how far I went, that nagging feeling lingered. I wasn't running from them. I was being herded. At some point during the night, I stopped at a gas station off the highway. It was one of those sketchy places that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 80s, with flickering neon signs and aisles stocked with dusty snack packs. The guy behind the counter barely looked up as I filled my tank and grabbed a coffee. The bell above the door jingled, and my heart jumped. I turned, half expecting to see the enforcer walk in with his sack of horrors. But it was just an old man, bundled in a thick coat, his face hidden under the brim of a hat. He shuffled past me without a glance, but as he walked by, I caught a faint metallic jingle, like bells. My stomach dropped. I hurried out of the store, spilling coffee on my hands as I climbed back into my car. I glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. There was something taped to my back windshield. It was a note, folded neatly and stuck under the wiper. I got out, my legs trembling, and snatched it before anyone could see. Scrawled in the same shaky handwriting as before were 2 words: "Time's up." I heard the jingle again, closer this time. I turned toward the gas station, but the old man was gone. The clerk was staring at me through the window, his eyes wide, as if he'd seen something he couldn't explain. I didn't wait to ask. I jumped into my car and sped off, my heart hammering so loud I could barely hear the engine. About an hour later, I saw the first signs that I was being followed. Headlights in my rearview mirror, steady and unblinking. At first, I thought it was just another car, but no matter how many turns I took or how fast I drove, it stayed with me. When I finally worked up the nerve to pull over, the car behind me slowed to a crawl, its headlights flashing once before it sped off into the darkness. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. I wasn't going to make it through the night. I ended up at a motel just off the interstate, the kind of place where the walls were thin and the air smelled faintly of mildew. The clerk didn't ask any questions as I handed him cash and took the key to room 7. I locked the door, pushed a dresser in front of it, and sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my bat like it was the only thing keeping me alive. I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep until I woke up to the sound of my laptop. I hadn't even taken it out of my bag, but somehow it was sitting on the desk, the screen glowing faintly in the dark. The naughty list site was open. There was no countdown this time, just a live feed. The camera was inside a room I didn't recognize, small, with peeling wallpaper and a single flickering light bulb. But the longer I stared at it, the more familiar it felt. Then I noticed the bed, the dresser, the bat lying on the floor. It was my motel room. I scrambled for the bat, but before I could grab it, the camera feed cut out, replaced by a single line of text. "Look behind you." I didn't want to turn around, but I couldn't stop myself. My entire body felt like it was moving in slow motion, my muscles locked in place as I turned toward the shadows in the corner of the room. He was there, the enforcer, his cracked porcelain mask glowing faintly in the dim light. His tattered suit hung from his thin frame, and in his hand he held a sack, writhing with something alive. He didn't move. He just stood there, tilting his head like he was studying me. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. He took a step forward, the bells on his suit jingling softly, and dropped the sack onto the floor. It split open, spilling out something I'll never forget. It was me. Not another me. Not a twin or a clone. It was my lifeless body, bloodied and broken, with my eyes wide open in a permanent expression of terror. I stumbled backward, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I was seeing. "That's not real," I whispered. "It's not real." The enforcer tilted his head again, almost like he was smiling. He reached down, grabbed the bat from my doppelganger's hand, and raised it over his head. I braced myself for the impact, but it never came. Instead, the screen went black. When I woke up, it was morning. I was still in the motel room, the laptop sitting on the desk as if nothing had happened. But the sack was gone. So was the enforcer. I thought it was over until I saw the message burned into the wall above the bed. "You're next." I don't know how long I have left. The streams are still happening, but my name hasn't appeared again, at least not yet. Alicia and Daniel are gone, and the police haven't found anything. I don't think they ever will. I've stopped running. There's no point. Wherever I go, he'll find me. And when he does, I won't be able to stop him. So if you see a site claiming to show Santa's naughty list, don't click it. Don't get curious. Don't try to help, because once your name's on the list, there's no getting off. A hacker sent me private footage of a secret Kanye West party. The guests weren't people, and the music was summoning something. All right, I swear this started like every other boring night of mine. I was sitting in my tiny apartment, scrolling Reddit and binging random conspiracy theory videos on YouTube. Those weird ones where people try to convince you that the government is controlled by lizard people or whatever. It was one of those nights where I was just existing, not doing anything important. That's when I saw it. A random email notification popped up on my laptop screen. The subject line: exclusive footage you won't find anywhere else. I don't even remember subscribing to anything like that, but curiosity got the best of me. I clicked it. Big mistake. The email didn't have much text, just a link to what looked like a private Google Drive and a short message that read, "For your eyes only. You'll never listen to music the same way again." No signature, no sender name. I knew it was sketchy. I mean, come on, who just clicks random links from strangers? Apparently, me. I clicked the link, and boom, I was in. It opened a folder titled KWEvent_unedited with about 20 video files. The file names were weird, just random strings of letters and numbers. I was immediately thinking Kanye West. I mean, who else uses KW for secret projects, right? At this point, I was grinning, thinking I'd just hit the jackpot. I thought maybe it was unreleased music or behind-the-scenes footage from one of his infamous Sunday service performances. But nah, this was something way darker, something I'll probably never unsee. The first video was about 3 minutes long. It opened with a shaky shot of what looked like an underground club, dimly lit with neon red lights and a fog machine going crazy. The camera panned across a crowd, but here's the thing. These weren't normal people. At first, I couldn't put my finger on what was off about them. Maybe it was their jerky movements, or the way they stood too still, like mannequins in between swaying to the music. They all wore black suits or dresses, like some kind of high-class funeral party. But their faces, oh man, their faces. They weren't faces at all. They were masks, or at least I thought they were masks. Perfectly smooth, featureless surfaces, kind of like those creepy mannequins you see in department stores. The camera zoomed in on one of them, a woman, I guess, but without eyes, a nose, or a mouth, just blank plastic where her face should have been. I thought it was some kind of artsy, high-fashion thing at first, but the longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. And then there was the music. It wasn't a Kanye track. It wasn't even music, really. It was this low, droning hum, like a broken speaker trying to vibrate your skull from the inside out. Layered on top of that was this faint whispering in a language I couldn't recognize. It sounded ancient, guttural, like it belonged in one of those documentaries about cult rituals. The camera eventually panned to a DJ booth at the front of the room, and there he was, Kanye West himself, or at least someone who looked like him. He was wearing a silver mask that covered his whole face, and he was conducting the music. Not DJing, conducting. His hands moved like a symphony conductor, but the sounds coming out of the speakers weren't following any beat or rhythm. They just got louder and deeper. At this point, I paused the video because I swear my apartment felt colder, like physically colder. My breath fogged up in front of me, which made no sense because I live in LA, and it wasn't even winter. I told myself it was my imagination, psyching myself out. But then I heard it, the whispering, the exact same whispering from the video. Only this time, it wasn't coming from my laptop. It was coming from behind me. I froze. I didn't dare turn around. Every horror movie instinct I had screamed, "Don't look, don't look." But I'm an idiot. I looked. There was nothing there. Just my apartment, empty and messy like always. I even got up to check the door and windows. Locked. My curtains didn't even move. But I swear, I wasn't imagining it. The sound was real. I sat back down and hit play again, trying to convince myself it was just paranoia. The video continued, but something had changed. The crowd wasn't just swaying anymore. They were moving in sync, like unnaturally synced. Imagine 100 people snapping their heads to the side at the exact same time, or lifting their hands in unison like puppets on strings. And then Kanye, or the guy pretending to be Kanye, started chanting. It wasn't in English. It wasn't even words. Just a series of guttural sounds, almost animalistic. As he chanted, the lights dimmed even more, and the crowd melted. I'm not kidding. Their bodies didn't fall or collapse. They liquefied, pooling into black puddles on the floor. The puddles started moving toward the stage, like they were alive. They merged into one huge, rippling mass, and Kanye just stood there, raising his arms like he was summoning it. The camera zoomed in on his face, or mask, I guess, and for a split second, I saw what was underneath. I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was just wrong. Like my brain couldn't process what it was seeing. I paused the video again, this time slamming my laptop shut. My heart was racing, and I swear the whispering was louder now. I should have stopped there. I should have deleted the email, burned my laptop, and gone to bed. But curiosity's a hell of a drug. I opened my laptop again, and that's when I saw it. The email refreshed itself. A new message popped up below the first one. It said, "Keep watching. It's already begun. I'll tell you what happened next in part 2. But I'll warn you now, you're not gonna want to know." I don't even remember how long I stared at the screen after seeing that new email. My hands were shaking, my mouth was dry, and every instinct I had was screaming to shut it all down. But I didn't, because some part of me, a really stupid part, wanted answers. I clicked on the email. The message was short, just like the first one. "Watch file 4. Don't skip ahead. They'll know." I can't even explain why, but I felt compelled to do what it said. Like, compelled. My fingers moved before my brain could catch up, opening the drive folder again. I scrolled past files 2 and 3 without even thinking, my eyes locking onto file 4 like it was calling out to me. Before I clicked play, I turned off every light in my apartment, like that would somehow make me less of a target. Dumb, right? But at the time, it felt like the only way to stay hidden. As the screen lit up my face in the darkness, I pressed play. The video started in what looked like a private jet. The camera was handheld, shaking slightly, and whoever was holding it was breathing heavily, almost panicked. The shot panned over to a man sitting in one of those oversized leather seats. At first, I thought it was Kanye again, but as the camera got closer, I realized this guy was off. He had Kanye's build, his mannerisms, even the same Yeezy hoodie I'd seen in paparazzi photos. But his skin wasn't right. It looked stretched, like someone had pulled it too tightly over his skull. His eyes didn't blink, and his mouth didn't move, but I swear I could hear him laughing. Not out loud, in my head. The person filming whispered something, their voice shaking so much I could barely make out the words. "It's not him. It's not him. They took him." The camera whipped around to the jet's window, and that's when things got seriously messed up. The plane was flying over a city, but the lights below weren't normal. They pulsed in patterns, almost like Morse code, except way too fast for my brain to process. The person filming gasped, and the camera dropped for a second, showing their feet. Here's the part that made my stomach drop. Their shadow wasn't theirs. It moved independently, twisting and writhing on the floor like it was alive. And when the camera tilted back up, the Kanye lookalike was gone. His seat was empty, but there was something sitting in his place. It was small, hunched over, and covered in wet black fur. Its head jerked toward the camera, and I swear it didn't have a face, just an empty, gaping void where its features should have been. The video cut out, leaving the screen pitch black for a few seconds. When it came back, the setting had changed. The person filming was now in some kind of basement, the camera shaking even more violently. The room was filled with tall glass tanks, each one illuminated by a faint, sickly green light. Inside, the tanks were people, or at least things that used to be people. Their bodies were distorted, stretched, and bloated, like they'd been submerged for years. Their skin was pale and translucent, and their eyes were wide open, staring blankly at nothing. The worst part? They were moving, slowly, sluggishly, like they were trying to get out but didn't have the strength. A low hum filled the room, vibrating through the speakers like a physical force. It sounded like the same droning music from the first video, but deeper, more menacing. The person filming whispered again, barely audible over the sound. They're using them for the summoning. At this point, I was so freaked out, I could barely keep watching, but I couldn't stop. The camera moved closer to one of the tanks, zooming in on the face of a man inside. His mouth was moving, but no sound came out. Then, as if he could see the camera, he turned his head and looked directly at it. He mouthed 3 words, "Help me, please." I slammed my laptop shut and shoved it off my lap, nearly knocking over my drink in the process. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might explode. I sat there in the dark, staring at the laptop like it was about to come alive and attack me. Then I noticed my phone. It was sitting face down on the coffee table, but the screen was glowing, vibrating with notification after notification. When I picked it up, I saw they were all from Instagram. Every single one was from an account I didn't recognize, and the messages were unsettling. The first one read, "You shouldn't have watched." The second said, "They know where you are." The third was a photo. I didn't want to open it, but my hands moved on their own again, tapping the notification. It was a picture of my apartment building, taken from the street. I dropped my phone like it had burned me. My first thought was to call the cops, but what was I supposed to say? "Hi, I watched a cursed Kanye West video, and now I think something's outside my apartment." They'd lock me up for sure. I paced around the room, trying to convince myself it was just some elaborate prank. Maybe a hacker who wanted to freak me out for opening their link. But when I picked up my phone again, there was another photo. This time, it was my front door. I didn't even hear footsteps in the hallway. No knock, no creak of the floorboards, just silence. And then, from the other side of the door, I heard the whispering, the same guttural, ancient language from the video. This wasn't a prank. Something was here. I know you're probably thinking, why didn't you just run? But where would I go? My apartment was on the 3rd floor, and the only way out was the front door. If something was waiting on the other side, I'd be walking straight into its trap. So instead, I grabbed a kitchen knife and pressed my ear to the door, trying to hear if whatever it was had moved. The whispering stopped, replaced by a low, rhythmic tapping. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Pause. My phone vibrated again, This time, the message was just a single word. Open. I'll stop here for now, but I promise I'll tell you what happened in part 3. Just know this. If you ever get an email like the one I did, don't open it. Don't watch the videos. And whatever you do, don't answer the door. I'm not going to lie. When the knocking stopped, I thought I'd bought myself some time. Like maybe whatever was out there got bored and decided to leave. But then I heard the sound that made my blood run cold. The lock on my front door clicked. Not like someone trying to pick it. No scratching or fumbling. It was smooth, deliberate. Like whoever or whatever was on the other side had a key. My stomach sank as the doorknob slowly began to turn, and I swear, I felt the air in my apartment shift. It wasn't just fear. It was like the entire atmosphere changed. Heavier, colder, almost suffocating. I backed away from the door, gripping the kitchen knife so hard my knuckles turned white. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I didn't dare look at it. All my focus was on the door, which creaked open just a crack, enough to see a sliver of the dimly lit hallway outside. There was nothing there, just empty space. The rational part of my brain, the part that was still desperately trying to convince me this was all some elaborate prank, wanted to slam the door shut and lock it again. But something about that empty hallway felt wrong, like it wasn't empty at all. I whispered to myself, "Don't do it. Don't look." But you know how these things go. Curiosity killed the cat, or in my case, the idiot who didn't know when to leave well enough alone. I crept forward, my socks barely making a sound against the wooden floor. The knife trembled in my hand, reflecting the faint glow of the hallway light. When I reached the door, I nudged it open just a little further, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't standing in the hallway. It wasn't even close to the door. It was at the far end of the corridor, barely visible in the flickering light. At first, I thought it was a person, tall, dressed in black, completely still. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't a person at all. Its body was too long, its limbs too thin, its head tilted slightly to the side, like it was studying me. And its face, if you can even call it that, wasn't a face at all, just a smooth, featureless surface, like the mannequins from the first video. The only difference was the faint impression of a mouth, a smile. Not a normal smile either. It was stretched too wide, curving upward in a way that made my stomach churn. The thing didn't move. It just stood there, watching. Or at least I assumed it was watching, since it didn't have eyes. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, and without thinking, I pulled it out. Another notification from the same unknown Instagram account. This time, it was a video. I shouldn't have opened it, but at this point, I wasn't exactly making good decisions. The video showed my hallway, the exact same hallway I was standing in. Except in the video, the lights weren't flickering. They were off, pitch black, and the thing at the end of the hallway, it was closer. I looked up from my phone, and sure enough, the hallway lights blinked out, plunging everything into darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I stumbled backward, slamming the door shut and locking it again. I stood there for what felt like hours, clutching the knife and waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. No knocking, no whispering, no sound at all. I started to think maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the videos and emails were just messing with my head, and I'd scared myself into seeing things that weren't there. But then my phone buzzed again, and this time, the message was different. "It's inside." I turned around so fast, I nearly tripped over my own feet, scanning the room for any sign of movement. Everything looked the same as before. The couch, the coffee table, the mess of takeout boxes on the counter. But something was off. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me from all sides. That's when I saw it. The shadow. It stretched across the floor, long and distorted, but there was nothing in the room that could have cast it. The shadow didn't move like a normal shadow either. It slithered, slow and deliberate, creeping toward me inch by inch. I backed up until my heels hit the wall, raising the knife like that was going to do anything, and then the shadow stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring, like the world is holding its breath. Then, from the center of the shadow, something began to rise. It was the same thing I'd seen in the hallway, but now it was different, bigger. Its limbs were longer, its body twisted and hunched, and that horrific smile was somehow even wider. It didn't walk or crawl. It floated, its feet barely brushing the ground as it moved closer. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there like a deer in headlights. But my body wouldn't listen. It was like I was frozen, completely paralyzed, as the thing hovered closer and closer. Its face was inches from mine when it finally stopped. I could feel the cold radiating off it, seeping into my skin. And then it spoke, not out loud, but directly into my head. A voice that was deep and guttural, layered with what sounded like 1,000 whispers. You saw too much. The next thing I remember is waking up on the floor. My laptop was still open, the screen black, and the knife was lying next to me. My phone was gone, and so was the thing, if it had ever been there at all. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd passed out, that the whole thing had been some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But when I stood up, I saw the scratches, long, jagged marks carved into the walls and floor, like something with claws had been there. And on my laptop screen, a new email was waiting for me. It said, "Watch file 7. I don't know what's on file 7. I haven't opened it yet, but if I do, I'll let you know what I find in part 4. I didn't open file 7 right away. I wanted to convince myself that I wouldn't, that I had learned my lesson. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time. The scratches on the walls weren't a figment of my imagination, and the shadow thing I'd seen, that was real. Too real. I needed to understand what was happening, and the only lead I had was that cursed video folder. So, I caved. I sat down on the floor, because for some reason, sitting on the couch felt too vulnerable, and clicked on file 7. The video started immediately. No loading screen, no buffering. This one was different from the others. It wasn't shaky or handheld. It looked like it had been filmed with high-end equipment, crystal clear, like something you'd see in a professionally shot documentary. The setting was a massive, dimly lit room, the kind of place you'd see in old, abandoned warehouses turned into illegal rave spots. But this wasn't a rave. In the center of the room was a stage. On it, Kanye, or the thing wearing Kanye's skin, stood behind a massive mixing board. His face was still hidden behind that silver mask, but something about the way he moved was wrong. Like his body was stiff, almost mechanical, but his arms flowed too smoothly. The crowd below the stage wasn't dancing. They weren't even moving. They were just standing, shoulder to shoulder, staring up at him. And just like before, they weren't people. Not really. Their faces were blurred, as though someone had smeared Vaseline over the camera lens. Their bodies twitched occasionally, but only in short, unnatural bursts, like glitches in a video game. Then Kanye raised his hands. The sound that followed wasn't music. It wasn't even noise. It was something else entirely, a frequency so low and distorted that I felt it in my chest before I heard it in my ears. My vision blurred for a second, and I thought my laptop screen had glitched. But no, the entire room in the video was warping. The walls rippled like water, bending inward toward the stage. The crowd started convulsing, their bodies bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Limbs stretched, heads snapped to the side at impossible angles, and some of them collapsed entirely, folding into themselves like origami. And the worst part, they didn't scream. Not a single sound. The camera zoomed in on the stage, where Kanye was now kneeling. He wasn't alone anymore. A figure stood beside him, tall and impossibly thin, draped in a cloak that seemed to absorb all the light around it. I couldn't make out its face, or if it even had one, but its presence radiated pure malice. I swear, just watching it made me feel like my chest was going to cave in. Kanye, or the thing pretending to be him, started chanting again, that same guttural, ancient language from the earlier videos. The figure beside him raised one impossibly long arm, pointing toward the camera, and for the first time, I realized something horrifying. The camera wasn't just filming, it was watching me. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My apartment was silent, save for the faint hum of my fridge in the kitchen, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I grabbed my phone, thinking maybe I could call someone, anyone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. No matter what button I pressed, it stayed black. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It started as a faint clicking, like claws tapping against glass. I looked towards the window, half expecting to see a bird, or maybe just my neighbor's cat. But the tapping wasn't coming from the outside. It was coming from inside the glass. I crept toward the window, heart pounding, knife still in hand. The blinds were drawn, but the tapping grew louder, more frantic, as if whatever was on the other side knew I was approaching. I reached out with trembling fingers and pulled the blinds open in one quick motion. The glass was empty, just my own reflection staring back at me, pale and terrified. But then it moved. My reflection blinked. I didn't. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. My reflection didn't follow. It stayed perfectly still, staring at me with eyes that were mine, but somehow weren't. Slowly, its lips began to move, forming words I couldn't hear. And then the tapping started again, not from the window this time, but from my laptop. I turned to look, and my laptop screen had turned on by itself. The video was still playing, but the camera was no longer focused on the stage. It was zooming in on something else, something far away in the background. It was me. The screen showed my apartment, my living room, exactly as it was in that moment. Except there was someone standing behind me, a shadowy figure, tall and hunched, its smile stretching across the screen like a crack in reality. I whipped around, the knife raised, but there was nothing there, just the empty room. When I turned back to the laptop, the video had frozen. The image of the figure burned into the screen. My phone buzzed again, and this time, the notification was a video call. The caller ID was blank. I don't know why I answered it. Maybe I thought it was the police, or someone who could explain what was happening. But when the call connected, there was no person on the other end, just static. And through the static, I heard a voice, deep, distorted, and dripping with malice. You invited us. The screen flickered, and for a split second, I saw something I'll never forget. A room filled with bodies, hung from the ceiling like marionettes, their faces covered in those same featureless masks. In the center of the room stood the figure in the cloak, its hand raised toward the camera, toward me. The call ended abruptly, and my apartment was plunged into silence once more. My laptop shut itself off, the screen going black. I sat there in the dark, gripping the knife and trying to convince myself that I was still alive, still real. And then, from the shadows, I heard it. The whispering. It wasn't coming from my phone or my laptop this time. It was coming from inside the walls. I'll tell you what happened next in part 5. But just know this. By the time I realized what they wanted, it was already too late. The whispering in the walls wasn't random. It had a rhythm, a cadence, like a chant that grew louder and more urgent with every passing second. I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block it out, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just in the walls. It was inside me, vibrating through my skull like a drill. I stumbled into the kitchen, clutching the knife so tightly, it felt like it was fused to my hand. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. That's when I saw it, the shadows on the floor, stretching out like black veins, converging in the center of the room. The shadows didn't move like real shadows. They pulsed, expanding and contracting in time with the whispers. And then slowly, they began to rise. First as a single, undulating mass, and then as a shape. A humanoid figure, tall and impossibly thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its face was a void, darker than the shadows that formed it. No features, no eyes, just a gaping absence that seemed to pull at the edges of reality. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Then it spoke. "You were chosen." Its voice wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, deep and invasive, like cold fingers crawling through my mind. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, frozen in its presence. "You saw the gate," it continued, "and now you must open it." I shook my head, finally finding my voice. "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to see anything." The figure tilted its head further, as if mocking me. "Intentions are irrelevant. The invitation was sent. You accepted." Before I could respond, the lights in my apartment flickered and died, plunging the room into total darkness. The only illumination came from the figure itself, a faint, pulsing glow that seemed to come from somewhere deep within its void-like form. And then the walls began to bleed. Not literal blood, at least I don't think so. It was black, viscous, oozing from the cracks like tar. The air filled with the stench of rot and decay, so thick I could taste it. The substance pooled on the floor, bubbling and writhing as if it were alive. I gagged, stumbling backward, but the figure didn't move. It stood there, watching, or whatever it did, without eyes. "The gate," it said again, its voice filling the room. "You must watch." Before I could process what was happening, my laptop screen lit up. It had turned itself on again, and this time, the folder of videos was gone. In its place was a single file, unnamed, with no thumbnail. The figure raised one impossibly long arm and pointed toward the screen. I didn't want to open it. Every fiber of my being screamed at me not to, but my body wasn't mine anymore. My hand moved on its own, clicking the file. The video began to play. The footage was impossible, It showed my apartment, but not as it was. The walls were covered in black tar, pulsating like they were alive. The room was filled with the same featureless figures I'd seen in the earlier videos, standing motionless, their heads turned toward the camera. In the center of the room was me, or something that looked like me. I was tied to a chair, my head hanging limp, blood dripping from my nose and mouth. My reflection, or whatever it was twitching, its movements erratic and jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. And then I looked up. My on-screen double raised its head slowly, its face splitting into a grotesque, unnatural grin. It wasn't my smile. It stretched too wide, tearing at the corners of its mouth. Its eyes were black voids, just like the figure standing in my kitchen. The camera zoomed in on my face, or its face, and I spoke, not in my voice, but in the same guttural, ancient language I'd heard in the other videos. The words were harsh, guttural, like a curse being carved into the air. The screen flickered, and suddenly, the figure from my kitchen was in the video, standing behind me. Its hands gripped my shoulders, long fingers digging into my flesh. My double screamed, a sound so raw and primal, it made my skin crawl. And then the video cut to black. I stared at the laptop, my chest heaving. The room was deathly silent again, but the figure hadn't left. It was closer now, its featureless face, inches from mine. I could feel the cold radiating from it, a void of heat and light. "You are the key," it said, its voice echoing inside my head. "And the door has been opened." Before I could react, it reached out, its hand passing through my chest like smoke. I felt a searing pain, like my heart was being ripped out. And then, nothing. When I woke up, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was standing in the same room from the videos, the massive, dimly lit space with the stage. The crowd of faceless figures was there, standing in perfect silence, their heads tilted toward me. On the stage was Kanye, still wearing the silver mask, his hands raised like a conductor. The sound started again, that same low, droning hum that vibrated through my bones. The figures began to sway, their movements jerky and inhuman, and I realized with a sickening certainty that I wasn't standing with them. I was one of them. The last thing I remember is looking down at my hands and seeing smooth, featureless skin. My body wasn't mine anymore. My thoughts weren't mine. And somewhere, in the depths of my mind, I could hear the whispers. "You are the key." I don't know what happened after that. I don't know if I'll ever be able to tell this story again. If you're reading this, if you've seen the same videos, or gotten the same emails, it's too late. They're already coming for you. I found a dark web forum about Jojo Siwa's disappearance. The truth about her life isn't what you think. Alright, before I even start, let me just say, I'm not one of those people. You know, the ones who are obsessed with conspiracy theories, watching TikToks about lizard people running the government, or that dude on YouTube who thinks every celebrity is a clone. That's not me. I'm a pretty normal guy, college student, part-time barista at Starbucks, and way too much time spent scrolling through Reddit and watching YouTube instead of studying. But last week, something happened that I can't explain. And trust me, I've tried to explain it. I've told myself I was imagining things, that I was tired, maybe even that I was pranked. But deep down, I know what I saw, and I can't stop thinking about it. It all started because of a stupid dare. My roommate Ryan and I were sitting in our dorm, after a late shift, downing cold leftover McDonald's fries and watching some random YouTube videos. We came across a video titled Top 10 Disturbing Things Found on the Dark Web. You've seen the type. Eerie music, blurred screenshots, and some British dude narrating like it's an episode of Black Mirror. Ryan, being Ryan, turned to me and said, "Bro, I dare you to check out the dark web. See if this stuff's actually real." Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone do that? And yeah, I should have just laughed it off and gone back to scrolling TikTok. But I didn't. I was bored, sleep deprived, and honestly, curious. I mean, it's not like I was gonna buy illegal stuff or anything. I just wanted to look. So, I downloaded Tor, which is basically the browser you need to access the dark web. It's surprisingly easy, which is honestly kind of scary. Within minutes, I was scrolling through these weird marketplaces, selling everything from fake passports to haunted dolls. Most of it looked fake, like a cheap knockoff horror movie. But then I found the forum. It didn't have a creepy name or anything, just the Velvet Room. It looked like a normal message board, kind of like Reddit, but darker, literally. The background was pitch black, the text was this sickly green, and the whole vibe just felt off. People were posting all kinds of random stuff. Rumors about celebrities, unsolved mysteries, even straight-up confessions to crimes. One thread caught my eye immediately. It was titled, "Jojo Siwa is missing, and nobody knows the truth." At first, I thought it was just some fan theory. You know, the usual like, "Oh, Jojo disappeared from social media for 2 days. She must be in trouble." But when I clicked on the thread, I felt my stomach drop. The first post was a link to a video. The video wasn't on YouTube or Vimeo or anything mainstream. It was hosted on some sketchy anonymous site with no controls, no pause button, no play bar, nothing. It started playing automatically, and I couldn't stop it. The footage looked like it was shot on an old camcorder. It was grainy and shaky, like the person filming was in a rush. It showed what looked like a basement, concrete walls, exposed pipes, and a single dim light bulb swinging from the ceiling. And then I saw her, Jojo Siwa. She was sitting on the floor, her back against the wall. Her signature blonde ponytail was gone, replaced by a mess of tangled, dirty hair. She wasn't wearing her usual sparkly outfits either, just a plain gray hoodie that looked way too big for her. Her face was pale, her eyes were sunken, and there was this raw, desperate look in them. She was holding up a piece of paper. On it, in shaky, handwritten letters, were the words, "Help me." I slammed my laptop shut so hard, I nearly cracked the screen. My heart was racing, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. It had to be fake, right? Some kind of sick prank or an elaborate ARG. But then I remembered something. Jojo Siwa had been weirdly quiet on social media recently. No Instagram posts, no YouTube videos, not even a TikTok. For someone who practically lived online, it was strange. I opened my laptop again, this time searching for news about her. Nothing came up about her being missing, just articles about her new projects and old interviews. But her socials? Dead silent. Her last post was from 2 weeks ago, a typical JoJo-style selfie with a caption about her upcoming tour. It didn't add up. I went back to the thread. The comments were a mix of people calling it a hoax and others saying it was real. One comment stood out. "Check the metadata. Look closer." I didn't even know what metadata was, but Google helped. Apparently, videos and photos can have hidden data embedded in them, things like the date, location, and device used to capture them. The commenter had posted a screenshot of the video's metadata. The location? Nebraska. Now, I'm no expert on JoJo Siwa, but even I knew she was from Nebraska. That's when the creeping dread really set in. Someone replied to the metadata comment with another link. This one led to a text file, like a transcript of a conversation. I clicked it. The conversation was between two users, Alpha68 and Red Sky Watcher. It read like a chat log, but the stuff they were saying was beyond messed up. They were talking about projects and targets in this cold, detached way, like they weren't even human. And then I saw her name, Alpha68. The Siwa girl is secured. Should we proceed? Red Sky Watcher. Not yet. Wait for instructions. She's worth more alive. For now. I stared at the screen, feeling like I was gonna throw up. This wasn't just a fan theory or some creepy video. These people were talking about JoJo Siwa like she was property, like they owned her. And then my laptop screen went black. At first, I thought it was just my laptop, overheating or something. But then white text appeared on the screen. You shouldn't be here. I slammed the laptop shut again, unplugged it, and shoved it under my bed like that would somehow erase everything. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't stop shaking. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing weird noises outside my window, like footsteps or whispers, but every time I looked, there was nothing there. Ryan was out at his girlfriend's place, so I was alone in the dorm. Just me and the creeping paranoia that someone, something, was watching me. The next day, I tried to forget about it. I told myself it was all just some elaborate prank, but then I got the email. It was from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, no message, just an attachment, a photo. It was a screenshot of me, sitting at my desk, watching the video. And that's when I realized they knew. They knew I'd seen it. The photo shook me to my core. It wasn't just the fact that someone had been watching me. It was how the picture looked, like it wasn't taken from a webcam or a phone. The angle was wrong. It was slightly elevated, as if whoever took it was standing right behind me. And the timestamp? It was from the exact moment I'd watched that video. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of fear before. The kind that pins you in place, like your body just refuses to move. But eventually, instinct kicked in. I deleted the email, yanked my laptop out from under the bed, and shoved it into my backpack. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I couldn't leave it lying around. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. I skipped class, ditched my Starbucks shift, and spent most of my time wandering around campus, jumping at every sound. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling like someone was following me, even though no one was ever there. By the time I got back to my dorm that evening, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the photo was some kind of phishing scam, and the timing was just a coincidence. Maybe the email wasn't even from the same people who made the video. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I walked into my dorm room, half expecting to find it trashed or my laptop gone, but everything was normal. Too normal. Ryan was sitting on his bed, playing Xbox, like nothing in the world was wrong. I thought about telling him what was going on, but I stopped myself. How do you even start a conversation like that? Hey man, I think some dark web creeps are stalking me. Oh, and by the way, they might have JoJo Siwa locked up in a basement. Yeah, no. Instead, I muttered some excuse about being tired and crawled into bed. I didn't bother unpacking my laptop. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was sitting on my nightstand, screen glowing. I had a text from an unknown number. "Check your laptop." My stomach dropped. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to even touch that thing. But something about the text felt like a threat. Like if I didn't do what it said, something worse would happen. I got up as quietly as I could, trying not to wake Ryan. My laptop was still in my backpack. I pulled it out, sat down at my desk, and powered it on. The screen flickered for a second, and then nothing. Just a blank desktop. Relief started to wash over me. Maybe the text was just a bluff. But then, without me touching anything, a file appeared on the screen. It was a video file, labeled lookcloser.mp4. Against every ounce of common sense, I clicked on it. The video was short, maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. It started with the same basement from the first video, same concrete walls, same swinging light bulb, but this time, Jojo wasn't sitting on the floor. She was standing, facing the camera. Her hands were tied in front of her with some kind of thick yellow rope, and there was duct tape over her mouth. Her eyes were wide and frantic, darting around like she was trying to figure out where the camera was. But the most disturbing part, she wasn't alone. There was a man standing behind her. Or at least, I think it was a man. He was wearing this grotesque, hand-stitched mask that looked like it was made out of old fabric. It covered his whole face, except for his eyes, which were dark and lifeless. He didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, towering over her like some kind of shadow. The video ended with a close-up of Jojo's face. The camera zoomed in until her eyes filled the screen, and then it cut to black. I was shaking. My hands hovered over the keyboard, unsure what to do next. But before I could react, my laptop screen changed again. This time, it was a live feed. It was my dorm room. I froze. The feed was from inside my dorm, showing me sitting at my desk. The camera wasn't coming from my laptop. It was too high up. My mind raced. Where was it? The smoke detector? The air vent? I couldn't tell, but it didn't matter. Someone had access to my room, and they were watching me in real time. Then, a message appeared on the screen, written in the same sickly green font from the forum. "Stay out of it. This is your only warning." I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. I didn't care if Ryan woke up. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my phone and wallet, threw on a hoodie, and bolted out the door. I ended up at the 24-hour McDonald's down the street. It was one of those brightly lit ones that never feel completely safe, no matter how many security cameras they have. I sat in a booth near the back, nursing a cold soda and trying to calm down. But then I noticed something. There was a car parked across the street, a black SUV with tinted windows. It hadn't been there when I arrived. I told myself it was nothing. Lots of people drive black SUVs. It's not exactly rare. But the more I watched it, the more certain I became that it was watching me. The engine wasn't running, and there was no movement inside, but the windows felt like eyes. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "Go home." I didn't go home. I wasn't stupid. Instead, I called an Uber and had it take me to the campus library. It was open 24/7 for students, and there were always people around, even in the middle of the night. I figured it was the safest place I could think of. As I sat there, surrounded by the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft whispers of late-night studiers, I started piecing everything together. Whoever these people were, they didn't just want me to stop looking into Jojo's disappearance. They wanted me scared, and it was working. But I couldn't shake the image of her face, the way she'd looked in that video, broken, terrified. like she'd already accepted that no one was coming to save her. I couldn't just walk away. I opened my laptop again, this time using a VPN and an incognito browser. If these people were going to track me, I wasn't going to make it easy for them. I went back to the dark web, back to the Velvet Room. The JoJo thread was still there, but the video link was gone. In its place was a new comment. She's running out of time. Do something or don't. We don't care. It was signed with a name I recognized, Red Sky Watcher. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know what to say, what to ask, but before I could type anything, another comment appeared. They're watching you too. I slammed the laptop shut again, my heart pounding. I looked around the library, half expecting to see someone staring at me, but everyone was buried in their books and laptops, oblivious to the fact that my life was unraveling. The black SUV was still out there, and now I was sure I wasn't going to make it through this alone. I didn't sleep that night. The library was safe in theory, bright, full of people, but every creak of the building, every shuffle of papers, felt like someone sneaking up behind me. I kept glancing at the entrance, expecting to see that black SUV parked outside, or worse, someone stepping inside, scanning the room for me. The thing is, I wasn't scared just for myself anymore. I kept thinking about JoJo, how pale she'd looked in that video, how her eyes darted around like she was begging someone to save her. And that guy behind her, the one in the mask, he wasn't standing there for fun. He was waiting. For what? I didn't know, but I had this sick feeling it wasn't good. By 6 a.m., the library was starting to fill up with early risers. I couldn't sit there any longer. I grabbed my stuff, put my hood up, and slipped out into the morning chill. The SUV was gone, but I knew better than to think I was safe. These people had cameras in my room. They had access to my laptop. Who knows what else they were capable of? I decided to go to the only place I could think of where I might find answers. Ryan. Not my roommate Ryan, though. This was a different Ryan. A guy I'd met in a Discord server a couple of years ago. He was one of those tech genius types, the kind of guy who could hack into your Wi-Fi just for fun. We drifted apart, but I still had his number. I sent him a text. I need help. Urgent. Dark web stuff. Can't explain here. He replied almost instantly. LOL. What did you do now? Call me. I found a quiet corner of the student center and called him. The moment he picked up, I blurted out everything. The Velvet Room, the video of JoJo, the live feed of my dorm, the black SUV. To his credit, he didn't laugh or tell me I was crazy. Instead, he asked one question. You still have your laptop? When I told him yes, he sighed. Okay, first things first. Don't use it. At all. If they've got live access, they've probably installed some kind of spyware. I'm guessing these guys are serious if they've already sent you threats. He told me to bring it to him. Luckily, he lived about an hour away, in a run-down apartment complex just off the highway. I caught an Uber there, constantly checking behind us to make sure we weren't being followed. Ryan's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a 20-something who spent most of his time online. Pizza boxes stacked in the corner, 3 monitors glowing on his desk, and a faint smell of energy drinks. When I handed him the laptop, he plugged it into some kind of external device and started typing like he was in a spy movie. I stood behind him, watching the lines of code scroll across the screen, feeling completely out of my depth. After a few minutes, he turned to me, his face unusually serious. Okay, so, you weren't kidding. This isn't just spyware. Whoever's watching you, They've got root access to your system. They can see everything, your files, your webcam, even your keystrokes. I felt sick. Can you get rid of it? He hesitated. I can try, but these guys are pros. If I mess with their code, they'll know. And if they're already threatening you... He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. That's when his face changed. He leaned closer to the screen, squinting at something. Wait, what's this? He clicked on a file I hadn't seen before. It was buried deep in my system, hidden under layers of random folders. When he opened it, my heart stopped. It was a list. A long, detailed list of names, each with a photo and a short description. At the top of the list was Joelle Joni Siwa, Jojo's full name. Her description was brief. Priority target. High value. Active. But she wasn't the only one. There were dozens of other names, each with their own disturbing descriptions. Susceptible. Monitor only. Recruitment candidate. Awaiting approval. Asset compromised. Termination scheduled. My name was on the list too. Next to it was a single word. Observer. Dude, what the hell is this? Ryan asked, his voice shaking. He wasn't laughing anymore. I didn't know what to say. All I could do was stare at the screen, trying to process what I was looking at. This wasn't just about Jojo. This was something bigger, something organized. And then the laptop screen went black. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, in the darkness, white text appeared. We warned you. Before we could react, the speakers blasted a piercing, high-pitched static. It was so loud, I thought my eardrums were going to burst. Ryan scrambled to unplug the laptop, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from inside the apartment. That's when we saw it. In the corner of the room, just above the pizza boxes, a tiny red light was blinking. A camera. Ryan ripped it off the wall and smashed it against the floor, but I could tell it was too late. Whoever these people were, they already knew we'd found the list. They knew we were trying to stop them. And now, they were coming for us. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Run. No more warnings. No cryptic threats. Just a single, terrifying command. I grabbed Ryan by the arm. We have to go. Now. He didn't argue. We bolted out of the apartment, sprinting down the hallway and out into the parking lot. The sun was just starting to set, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. That's when I saw it. The black SUV. It was parked at the far end of the lot, engine running. The windows were still tinted, but I could feel whoever was inside watching us. The driver's side door opened. We didn't stick around to see who or what got out. Ryan and I ran until we were out of breath, weaving through back alleys and side streets, trying to lose them. Eventually, we ducked into an old laundromat, hiding behind a row of broken dryers. Ryan was shaking. Dude, what the hell did you get us into? I started, but I stopped myself. Because the truth was, I had gotten us into this. I'd opened the thread. I'd watched the video. I'd kept digging, even when they told me to stop. But now, it wasn't just about me. It wasn't even about Jojo anymore. This was about all the names on that list. All the people these monsters had targeted, manipulated, or killed. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't know if I even can do anything. But one thing's for sure. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Ryan and I sat in that broken down laundromat, backs pressed against the cold metal of a dryer that hadn't worked in years. The hum of the one machine still running filled the silence between us, drowning out our frantic breaths. Neither of us spoke. What could we even say? Somewhere out there, a black SUV was prowling the streets. its occupants waiting to make their move. Somewhere else, Jojo Siwa, or whatever was left of her, was living a nightmare that I had only begun to glimpse. And here we were, hiding like rats. Ryan broke the silence first. "You've got to go to the cops." I didn't even look at him. "And tell them what?" "That the dark web is watching me, and I found Jojo Siwa in a basement? They'd laugh me out of the station." "They might, but..." He trailed off, rubbing his hands over his face. "Look, man, this is way bigger than us. These people, whoever they are, they're not playing around. You saw what they did to your laptop. And that list, they're keeping tabs on all those people. On you. They're gonna come for you, whether you talk to the cops or not." I knew he was right, but the idea of going to the police felt pointless. They couldn't even catch people robbing a 7-Eleven half the time. How were they going to fight a group this organized, this invisible? No, the only way out of this was to keep digging, to find out who these people were and expose them. If I could do that, maybe, just maybe, I could take them down before they took me. We decided to split up. It wasn't ideal, but sticking together made us an easy target. Ryan gave me a burner phone he'd been saving for emergencies and told me to ditch my regular one. "If they're tracking you, this'll at least buy you some time." I didn't ask where he got it. Before we left the laundromat, Ryan turned to me. "Promise me something," he said. "If things get bad, you'll disappear. Like, really disappear. Don't try to be a hero." I didn't answer him. I couldn't. I spent the next 2 days laying low, moving from one crowded place to another. A 24-hour diner, a packed mall, even a Walmart, where I killed time pretending to shop. I used public Wi-Fi sparingly, trying to avoid anything that might draw attention to myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I half expected to see the masked man from the video standing there, silent and waiting. On the second night, I finally worked up the nerve to check the burner phone. It was cheap, the kind you'd see in a bad crime movie, but it got the job done. I connected to a coffee shop's Wi-Fi and went back to the Velvet Room. The JoJo thread was gone. In its place was a new thread, pinned to the top of the forum. The title was simple, but it sent a chill down my spine. Observer, termination in progress. I clicked on it. The thread was empty. No posts, no comments. Just the title staring back at me, mocking me. But as I sat there, trying to figure out what it meant, a message appeared at the bottom of the screen. "Enjoy the show." Before I could close the browser, a video started playing. This one wasn't like the others. It was live. The camera showed a dark room, lit only by the faint glow of a monitor. At first, I couldn't tell what I was looking at. The angle was strange, the image slightly out of focus. But then I saw her. JoJo was strapped to a chair, her wrists bound to the armrests with thick leather straps. Her head lolled forward, her hair matted and streaked with something dark. Blood, maybe. She wasn't moving. For a horrifying moment, I thought she was dead. But then she twitched. A voice crackled through the speakers. It was distorted, metallic, like whoever was speaking was using a voice modulator. "You were warned, but you didn't listen." The camera panned, revealing the man in the mask standing in the corner of the room. He was holding something in his hand, a long, thin object that glinted in the dim light. A knife. I wanted to scream at the screen, to tell him to stop, to do anything other than what I knew he was about to do. But I couldn't. I was frozen, my fingers gripping the edge of the table so hard they ached. The man stepped closer to JoJo. the knife glinting in his hand. He moved slowly, deliberately, like he was savoring every second. When he reached her, he knelt down, bringing his masked face level with hers. And then he whispered something. I couldn't hear what he said. The microphone didn't pick it up, but whatever it was, it made Jojo's eyes snap open. For the first time, she looked directly at the camera. At me. The feed cut out. The screen went black, and I was left staring at my own reflection. I felt sick, like I was going to throw up right there in the middle of the coffee shop. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to help her, to find her. But how? The Velvet Room wasn't exactly posting GPS coordinates. And even if they were, what was I supposed to do? Walk in there and play hero. I'd be dead before I got through the door. But then I remembered the list, the names, the descriptions. It was all there. If I could get back to Ryan's place, maybe I could recover it, figure out where these people were operating from. I didn't have a plan yet, but I didn't care. I just knew I couldn't sit there doing nothing while I couldn't even finish the thought. Getting back to Ryan's apartment wasn't easy. I avoided main streets, cut through alleys, and hopped on random buses to throw off anyone who might be following me. By the time I got there, it was well past midnight. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Normally, you could hear the hum of Ryan's computer through the thin walls, or the faint sound of whatever techno garbage he was listening to. But tonight, nothing. I knocked on the door. No answer. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. That's when I saw it. The door wasn't locked. It wasn't even fully closed. It was cracked open, just enough for me to see inside. I pushed it open slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The apartment was dark, the air thick with the smell of something metallic. Blood. And then I saw him. Ryan was slumped over his desk, his monitors glowing faintly behind him. There was a knife sticking out of his back, the handle covered in something wet and glistening. Blood pooled beneath his chair, seeping into the carpet. On his monitor was a single line of text. Observer terminated. I stumbled back, my mind racing. They'd gotten to him. They'd killed him. And now, I was next. But before I could run, my burner phone buzzed. A new text. Time's up. I didn't think. I just ran. I didn't stop running until I hit the edge of the city. By the time I slowed down, my legs were burning, my lungs felt like they were on fire, and my thoughts were an incoherent blur. Ryan was dead. The words, "Observer terminated," were burned into my brain, flashing behind my eyes every time I blinked. I knew this wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a promise. The streetlights cast long, flickering shadows as I stumbled through an industrial park. The whole area felt abandoned. Warehouses with shattered windows, graffiti-covered walls, the occasional rusting chain-link fence. I didn't have a plan, a destination, or even a clue about what to do next. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in one place for too long, not with them watching. I found an old, half-collapsed warehouse with a broken door and slipped inside. It smelled like mildew and rust, but at least it was quiet. I climbed up to the second floor, wedging myself into a corner that felt hidden enough. For the first time in hours, I let myself stop moving. But my mind? It wouldn't stop. Ryan's death had shattered something in me. I was no longer just scared. I was furious. These people, whoever they were, had killed my friend. They were toying with Jojo, treating her like she was nothing more than a piece on a chessboard. And me? I was next on their list. I pulled out the burner phone, my hands trembling. I didn't know why I still had it. It felt like a ticking time bomb in my pocket, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I just wanted to fight back. The phone buzzed before I could do anything. A text popped up. "You're closer than you think." My blood ran cold. Closer to what? Jojo? The people behind the velvet room? Or my own death? I didn't want to know, but I also couldn't ignore it. Against every instinct screaming at me to stop, I texted back, "What do you want from me?" I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, 3 dots appeared, like someone was typing. To understand. The reply made no sense. I typed back, my frustration boiling over. Understand what? Why you're torturing people? Why you killed my friend? Again, there was a pause. Then another message appeared. "You're part of the experiment." My heart sank. Experiment? What experiment? I thought about the list we'd found on my laptop. Jojo's name, my name, all the others. Were we all part of this? Whatever this was. I needed answers. I needed to know what was happening, why they were targeting us. But before I could type anything else, another message appeared. "Check your surroundings." The warehouse suddenly felt smaller, darker, like the shadows were pressing in on me. I scanned the room, every instinct on high alert. For a moment, I didn't see anything unusual, just broken machinery, piles of debris, and then I saw it, a red light blinking in the corner, a camera. My stomach dropped. How long had it been there? How long had they been watching me? Before I could move, the burner phone buzzed again. "Look closer." I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. I crept toward the camera, my heart hammering in my chest. When I got close, I saw that it wasn't just a camera. There was a small device next to it, a box with a single wire running into the wall. Taped to the box was a handwritten note. "Open me." My hands were shaking as I pulled the tape away and pried the box open. Inside was a small USB drive. Nothing else. No explanation, no instructions. Just the drive. I hesitated. This felt like a trap. But at this point, what choice did I have? If this was their way of giving me answers, I wasn't about to turn it down. I grabbed the USB and bolted from the warehouse. I needed somewhere with a computer, somewhere safe. Well, as safe as anywhere could be right now. After a few minutes of wandering, I found a 24-hour internet cafe tucked into a strip mall. The place was mostly empty, just a bored-looking cashier and a couple of people staring at screens. Perfect. I sat down at a terminal in the corner, plugged in the USB, and opened the only file on it, velvettruth.mp4. The video began with static, the kind that makes your skin crawl. Then, slowly, an image faded in. It was a room I didn't recognize. White walls, bright fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor. On the table was Jojo. She wasn't tied up this time, but she wasn't moving either. Her eyes were open, staring blankly at the ceiling, her lips moving as if she was whispering something. The camera zoomed in on her face. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and there were deep bruises around her neck. But what caught my attention was her expression. It wasn't fear or pain. It was emptiness, like whoever she used to be was gone. A voice came through the speakers, distorted and robotic. "You wanted answers. Here they are." The video cut to a series of images, dozens of them, flashing too fast to process. Faces, documents, maps, strange symbols. But one image burned itself into my mind. A logo. It was simple. A black circle with a red V in the center. The Velvet Room. The voice continued. "We are not the monsters you think we are. We are scientists, engineers, visionaries. The Velvet Room is not a place. It is a concept, a gateway to understanding the limits of human potential. The images slowed, focusing on a single document. It looked like a government file, heavily redacted, with Jojo's name at the top. Below, it was a series of words: behavioral modification, memory suppression, neural reprogramming. The voice grew colder. Joelle was chosen because of her influence, her reach. She was a test, and she was successful. The video cut back to Jojo. She was sitting upright now, her eyes fixed on the camera. But something was wrong. Her movements were jerky, robotic, like she was a puppet on strings. When she spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless. This is the future. I am the future. You cannot stop it. The screen went black. Then, one final message appeared. You are part of this now. Run if you like, but you cannot escape the Velvet Room. I ripped the USB out of the computer and ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get as far away as possible. But no matter how far I go, no matter how hard I try to forget, I know the truth. They're still watching. They're always watching. And someday, they'll come for me.